So I wake up this morning and I'm like, well, it's a quiet day in hockey. And then I load up Instagram and I'm like, oh, I got tagged. Oh, look at that. So I understand, one thing about being a Canucks fan, it involves degradation, humiliation, and just annual heartache. Um, it's a romance relationship without the romance, basically, being a Canuck fan. And it sometimes it's hard. But at no point this year did I say they're going to be a playoff team. I did see points this year where the West was looking so bad at the bottom spot for those wildcard spots. I thought maybe, but odds are that somebody would get hot, and they did, and the Canucks weren't one of those teams. Now, the media narrative that was being fed to us towards the end of January, that I never reported on this channel because I thought it was BS when it was being reported, is it's a favorable February schedule. Look at this. The Canucks only have 14 games in February, and it's so favorable to them because 8 of the 14 are on the road where they aren't very good, but it's a favorable schedule. It wasn't. I really think that selling Canuck fans on hope is bad. It just feels to me like in Titanic when they're like, is there anything to worry about? And one of the White Star employees, who's an idiot, goes, "Oh, we likely threw a rudder. Nothing to worry about. Go back to sleep and die." And it sort of feels like sometimes Canuck fans are being fed malarkey, when cold hard truth is in order. Um, I never bought into this idea that the Canucks were just about to turn the corner, but start of February, they win in Colorado 5-1. And that led to widespread optimism, which is sometimes a bad thing. Now, there's an asterisk next to Colorado because at the start of February, they were ahead of Vancouver. When you look at the win-loss record, they were 2 games above 500. Vancouver was 1 game above 500 because of this fact that overtime losses don't count as losses. They go into the column that used to be ties. It really artificially inflates records. And this is part of the reason NHL does it, is because then as Canuck fans, you'll look at the record and go, we're not too bad. They were. And then the East Coast swing comes in, right? So East Coast swing, anytime they've done it this year, has been basically death. Okay. In Philadelphia, they lose 2-1. In Washington, they lose 3-2. At the time, they were ahead of Philadelphia in the standings. Washington ahead of them, and then they lose 4-3 in overtime in Chicago. Chicago's never an easy game for Vancouver. It's just not a thing. If Vancouver blows them out, I always assume that Taves and Kane must have sat out because it's never an easy game. And this was at a point where Chicago was really red hot. Vancouver meets them, they force overtime, but they lose. And then they come home and they win in a shootout against division-leading Calgary. This was a win entirely engineered by Jacob Markstrom. Not necessarily because the team was better, but because Markstrom said, yeah, I'm not losing tonight. So what this did was it sort of artificially inflated the Canucks numbers because they're now, that's 2 wins, 2 regulation losses, and an overtime loss. So when I did the power rankings after this game, and the Canucks really didn't move up anywhere, there were Canuck fans who weren't happy, and I got it at the time. I thought, no, I get it, because you're looking at the overall record over the last week and a half, and you're going, no, we're playing pretty well, because you only have a 1-goal loss in Washington and a 1-goal loss in Philly, and you blow out Colorado. What we didn't know at the time was Colorado was going to get blown out a few times over the month of February. But then the wheels come off, and it is this game against San Jose where the wheels really come off. They lose 7-2 in Vancouver. And it is a humiliating loss. Then they, in Anaheim, lose 1-0 in a game that was kind of slow. Then they win in a shootout in Los Angeles 4-3, which was weird because normally when they go through California, it's the Valley of Death. But the Valley of Death shows up in San Jose where they lose 3-2. So here's another road trip. And they go 1-2 on that road trip, and the one win is a shootout. Notice, Of their 3 wins in the month of February so far that we've looked at, 2 of them are by shootout. I qualify those as ties. Still, when I do the power rankings, and I told people, I'm going to change it. I'm not going to make it as fluid as it's been. But to me, a shootout win, that's nice, but it'd be more impressive if you win in regulation, especially against the Kings, a team who were and are still down, right? So the Canucks come out of that, and then they come home against the Arizona Coyotes, who are heating up. They lose in overtime 3-2. Then they lose 4-0 against the New York Islanders. It is at this point where, to a man, most Canuck fans go, well, better luck next year. They win 4-0 against the Ducks at home. They lose in a shootout 3-2 in Colorado. They lose 3-2 in Arizona. They're not getting destroyed for the most part. 4-0 against the Islanders, 7-2 against San Jose are the 2 examples where they did kind of get destroyed. But I'm going to circle back. Who said this was an easy schedule? Who in the media looked at this and said, this is a favorable schedule for the Canucks to move up? You got Anaheim twice. The Canucks' record against Anaheim, I don't care what their record is. The Canucks' record against Anaheim has been terrible for a long time. San Jose, oh yeah, we love playing San Jose. That's 2 games. So that's 4 out of the month I've already knocked off as not easily winnable. You got Calgary division leader, that's 5. You've got LA Valley of Death, that's 6. Washington Capitals in Washington, 7. So now I've already knocked off half the schedule just off the top of my head. Islanders, they're not a given. They're the best team. Well, at the time they were first in their division. They're still one of the best teams in their division. Arizona's on their way up. Yeah, it's not an easy schedule after all. They finished the month 4-7-3. So they won 4 out of the 14 games. And when you're playing every other night and you have injuries. Berchi's been out since February 4th. Sutter's been out since February 11th. Tanev and Virtanen have both been out since Valentine's Day. And Edler just came back. Edler was out for this. So, really, while I'm not going to use injuries as an excuse, because I don't think that if all of these players play, that these games necessarily become wins where they're losses. It is not a minor thing that you're missing so many players from a team that doesn't have great depth. And Vancouver, for years, has had this issue where the depth isn't really there, even when the Canucks were really good. I'm talking, during the 2010-2011 season, 2011-2012 seasons, where, they won President's Trophies. But, man, if guys start getting hurt and you got to call up guys from the American League, it gets dicey fast. Now, Alex Biega's a pretty solid fill-in who's been called into action far more this year than I think he or any of us would have expected. When you've lost Tanev and Edler, who are your 2 best defensemen, at times during the month of February, when I would do my daily reviews, I would see Canuck fans saying we had an AHL roster on the blue line, and they weren't far off. And this is just part of being Canucks. Every single year, you're going to have injuries, and we've gone over this before in previous seasons. The Canucks always have crippling injuries. It's just the way it works. There have been times in the past where the athletic trainer was blamed. I remember that was a big meme on the Canucks forum at one point, that you could blame the athletic trainer. It is easy to blame the schedule and say, well, they travel quite a bit more than a lot of other teams. Maybe that's what it is. Whatever the reason is why Canucks get hurt, they get hurt. I think the other problem was, because the West was so weak at the end of January, the Canucks' record going into February was kind of glossed over. They were 8-6 in October. They had a good month of October, which I think, again, when the Canucks get off to a fast start and Canuck fans go, yes, we're going to go to the playoffs. And I'm like, oh, God, not again. And I say that as a Canuck fan. That's the weird thing here. I would love to see them go to the playoffs and do some damage, but I'm realistic. I don't see them as a playoff team. I don't see them having the depth to reach the playoffs. You look at teams that are ahead of them right now, like Minnesota, even Dallas, and I've talked about Dallas' scoring depth. Dallas' scoring depth isn't very good, but the overall depth at forward and on the blue line is pretty good. I'll use a good example in Dallas is Gurrianov. Gurrianov has not found his offensive touch, but he's been solid when he's been called into action with Dallas, and it's there. You get the feeling like if they bring him back and give him a more prominent role next year right out of the gate, maybe we'll start seeing something there. And ditch Nichushkin. Don't send him to Vancouver. No. November, they went 3-8-3. And this was where they went to the East Coast. And injuries galore. And losses started piling up. But then in December, they go 8-5-1, which they did quite well at points in December. And again, it made Canuck fans say, you know what, we can do this. Again, because the West was weak. And then in January, they went 4-3-2. And again, because two of those losses are in that third column, I can't say they went 4-5 in the month of January. They had a below 500 record because of the way the NHL does this. They were technically one game above 500. Here, rather than being 3-11, they were 3-8-3. Instead of being 8-6, they were 8-5-1. Minor difference, but it does make them look a little bit better. I was going to go through and pull every single injury report for all of these games, but I don't need to do that. Because again, at that point, then people could say, oh, he's just making excuses and saying that's why they were, unvictorious. I like that, unvictorious. I may use that in other videos. They were unvictorious for most of the month of February. They're just not there yet. Now, next week, Quinn Hughes, very likely to join the Canucks. That will help their blue line tremendously. And this year, they're going to get another decent prospect in the draft. There are other guys who are in the offing in terms of prospects who are on their way up. I know, Canuck fans are upset that Dahlin is gone. Let it go. But there are other prospects in the system. I look at the development this year of Gaudette. Gaudette's a guy that I look at in development. And I think for me as a fan of the team, I just look for incremental improvements. I look for improvements by players. I don't care about this. Because in the end, they're not going to make the playoffs. And at no point this year did I say they were going to. That's why when they would win a game and they would jump into that number 2 wildcard spot, I'd throw on my Canucks gear and go, they're in the playoffs, so I'm going to wear their gear before they fall back out. Because to me, the roster they have, the fact they were close to the playoffs, it felt more to me like an indictment of the West than the Canucks were playing really, really strongly. Because when you look at the Eastern race, there's no point where the Canucks, if they had been an Eastern team, would have been anywhere near the playoffs. And it is only over the last few weeks that things between the West and the East wildcards have started to even up. Where you can look at the Western wildcards and say, yeah, they probably deserve to be in there. There's going to be at least a team in the East that misses the playoffs who would have made it in the West. But it is not the egregious situation it was in January. The thing is, when we were looking for which teams would heat up, the media sold this hope in Vancouver that things would turn around. And I wasn't buying it. This is not an easy schedule. And anybody that looked at this schedule before February and said, that really favors Vancouver, that they got a really good chance. There's Washington and Calgary, and there's the 2 against San Jose and Islanders, and 2 against Arizona. They struggle with Arizona at times. But, other than those half a dozen games, well, and then there's Chicago. In Chicago, that's not going to be easy. Anaheim, I know Anaheim's below them, but they struggle against Anaheim. Colorado's in the race too. Other than all of the games on the schedule, it's not that bad. It was a pretty brutal schedule. And, I think next year we can look for improvement with the Canucks. Don't be surprised if I favor the Canucks to make a large improvement next year. I think, again, I want to see how Hughes does after another year of NCAA, a year of growth and learning and all of that wonderful stuff. and see what he does. What I saw of him last July in the prospects game, pretty decent little defenseman who could definitely have used another year of development. No problem with that. I have no problem with that whatsoever. But the hope is there. I don't have any delusions of grandeur that they're developing a cup contender. I think the other side of this, the elephant in the room, as it were, is that Pedersen hit the wall. Rookies, it's usually around the 50 game mark. It's usually around the 50 game mark that they hit the wall and their scoring disappears. Whether it's because teams are checking them more, it's the rough NHL schedule and just how arduous it is. He's definitely hit the wall. And there hasn't been anybody who's shown that scoring level to be able to take the weight off of him. Horvat's scoring's dropped off. Besser, the assists are there, the goals aren't. And who else is there? Realistically, with Berchi out, who else is there? Virtanen, his goal scoring before he got hurt, had dried up too. So Virtanen had this really strong start, and then it dried up for him. We'll see where he is next year. I was really optimistic about Virtanen. Now I've tempered that. But it's there is no easy schedule. There you go. My tale of the month of February for the Vancouver Canucks. And again, if you're a Canuck fan watching this, I think the future is bright. Just don't focus too much on the present. Don't pull apart every game. Don't focus on the injuries and say, oh, if only Tanev doesn't get hurt, we would have won these games. Or if Edler wasn't hurt most of the year, we would have won these games. Because that's the kind of stuff that'll just drive you crazy. Just focus on what's coming up. And what's coming up is pretty good. It's the same message I would give fans in Buffalo. Same message I would give fans. Who else has fallen out of the race? I think Colorado's future is decent too. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of doom and gloom if Colorado does end up missing. But I don't know. I don't get it. I think there's a lot of parity in the NHL, and in the case of the Canucks, they're just not quite there. So there you go. I'm all done. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.